Sometimes in this podcast, we get really technical.
When it started going meh, meh, meh at me when I was attacking Bravo.
I kissed an orc and I liked it. The taste of his Bulgur chapstick. I kissed an orc just to try it. I hope my ally friends don't mind it. It felt so wrong, it felt so right. Don't meet up in love tonight.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Lion's Pride Tavern podcast number 43. As usual, tonight we talk about our weekend raid, and Mac is back from the Goblin Goldcast. But before all that, let's start off with introductions. I'm your host, Fafford. I play a Dwarven Beastmaster Hunter in the awesome game World of Warcraft. Next up, JobUi.
Hi, I'm JobUi. I play a Worgen Frost Mage.
Lorelei.
Good evening, it's Lorelei, your Night Elf Fury Warrior.
Epistle.
I'm Epistle, a Janai Protection Paladin.
Tapachino cannot make it again tonight this week, but we hopefully will see her next weekend. I think she's enjoying her motorcycle is what I think.
I think so too.
I would be. That's a nice bike.
Yeah, right? Summer motorcycle podcast. Which do I do?
So is she going out and getting the PWN license plate?
Nope,
Yeah.
she got tap.
Yeah,
Oh,
she
did
got one
she?
that says
Oh,
tap.
even better.
Yeah.
Yep, she was excited about that.
I think it's
didn't give-
plus tap plus. I think. Is
Oh,
what
maybe
she
that's
got.
what she did. Yeah, for healing. Yeah, something like that. I was really surprised because I don't think we can have that short of a license plate number.
Well, bikes
where
only
we're at,
have
so-
a short license plate number.
Yeah.
It's a small plate. You can only fit so many letters on it.
True.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. JobUi, how did we do this weekend?
We did great in our opening raid in Tomb of Sargeras. On Friday night, we got in there and we took Goroth down right away, it seemed. That seemed like a pretty straightforward, easy to understand fight, and we did really well on it. Blew right through it. We went on to Demonic Inquisition, and we did very well on Demonic Inquisition. I think we had a couple of pulls on that. It wasn't too bad. Then we moved on to Harjatan, and if I recall, Harjatan took us a number of pulls. But I mean, we were running a little slow because we were doing explanations and stuff, and figuring out some mechanics and whatnot. And I think that's where we ended on that night. Was we had taken down Harjatan right at the end, if I believe, or if I recall correctly. And then the next night we came back and we went after Sisters of the Moon. No, we went after Mistress Sazine and took Mistress Sazine down. And that took a few attempts, but we eventually got it figured out and got that down. And then we went on to Sisters of the Moon, and we did pretty well on Sisters of the Moon, but didn't quite get Sisters down.
Yeah, I think we got the order out just a little bit because I recall we just barely finished Demonic Inquisition.
Is
And
that
then Harjatan was Saturday night.
was that the next night?
Yeah, I think so.
I might have been confused on which nights we did them.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, Harjatan, it was kind of like Gorath. we did the explanation in one shot.
yeah, it wasn't a terribly difficult fight. You know, all the fights I thought were very interesting and fun, though. I liked all of them.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
gotta love the new content.
I also like that on some of them, in particular, Mistress Sazine, I liked the mechanics in that fight. That there was lots of things to do. You know, like you had to dodge this, you had to grab this at the right time and let the whale suck the ink off of you, and then you had to, you know, do this other thing. You know, it was just a fun fight where there seemed like you had to be on your toes and do lots of stuff, and I like fights like that.
Well, just to let our listeners know, so we have abandoned Nighthold. We got our AOTC out of it last week, and then we got our AOTC, which is ahead of the curve, for
Trial of Valor.
Trials.
Trial of Valor. Yeah,
Yeah, Halls is the dungeon.
the dungeon. Yeah. So we have moved on to Tomb of Sargeras. We went from Nighthold Heroic now to Tomb of Sargeras Normal. And the first boss is Goroth, then Demonic Inquisition, Harjatan. Those are typically the three everybody's going to do. Then you got your choices. Actually, I think you even have your choices after Demonic.
No, I think it's right after. It's right after the first boss. Then you
Yeah,
can
after
choose which
Goroth.
one you. Yeah, after
Oh, you
Goroth,
can
you
go
can
wherever
go
you
whichever
want.
way you want. Yeah.
Except
Yeah.
I think one leads to another. So it's I think you have two that are paired. Well, actually, three sets of two that are paired in different directions.
Okay. But we decided to go Goroth, Demonic Inquisition, Harjatan, and then Sazine, and then the Sisters of the Moon. Now, to be honest, I thought we'd get a little bit further the first night. I didn't think Demonic Inquisition would actually slow us down, but there's just a few details in there that are new to people. This is seeing the fight for the first time. A lot of our raiders, just so people know, we do raid for 2 hours on both Friday and Saturday night. A lot of our people like to be surprised by the fights. There's a few of us. Lorelai's one. She raids with another group. Now, what did you were telling my wife that you got through 6 bosses the first night?
We did. We didn't kill Desolate Host, but when we came back in on, I think it was Thursday, it said that we had our dungeon guide said that we had, so we weren't able to go back in and finish him. So we had to skip him for this week. And
Was that bugged out?
Yeah, it had some weird bug because it's a 2-phase fight where you've got people fighting on the top half of a platform and then there's people underneath. So you have to divide the raid. And either the top or the bottom half, I don't remember, killed the boss, but the other half didn't. And I think that's going to probably be a bug unless they fix it. So we had to skip him, and we got a couple of pulls on Kill Jaden, but we didn't have time enough to actually get into that one very well. But
That's awesome.
I agree. People need to watch these fights, and Fat Boss admittedly did not have all the fights up on the PTR, but they should hopefully by the end of this week have updated versions.
They've been putting updated versions up. I know.
Yeah,
I do miss line of sights versions. Those were really fantastic for giving you a brief explanation. The Fat Boss ones are a little more cumbersome. Not bad, but just not quite as clear as one might like.
Well, I think with Fat Boss, they try to explain normal and heroic at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
So they're talking. They talk more heroic than normal. So when you come into it, it's like when we were doing. What one was that? I think that was Sazine. We thought, watching Fat Boss, there's 3 green arrows that come out, and you got to split the groups between 3 arrows. And then we got in there, and it's like normal. There's only 1 green arrow. Yay! That's easy. So
yeah. Although, from what I understand, I guess Line of Sight is sitting this one out. They're not doing them for Tomb of Sargeras, which is sad.
That's too bad.
I'll miss them.
Well, the thing is, too, things like Sazine and other fights like that, there are so many moving parts. If you feel like you have to know every moving part to be successful, it overcomplicates the fight. Because usually there's only 1 or 2 things that you need to know, or each person in each role has to be aware of 1 or 2 key things. The rest are things you can kind of pick up as you go along. Like, I know, watching the Sazine video, it was freaking me out. I just thought, how can we possibly handle all of these things? And then we get in there, and we decided after a little bit of a discussion, well, why don't we just take a look at the fight? And we get in and, get her down to 23 or something like that on the first attempt. And it's like, oh, okay, so now we just have to watch for that thing. That's a real problem. And this other dynamic, that's a problem. Everything else is, just the usual stuff on floor and avoid issues, not as big a deal. So I like a simple breakdown of the core issues as opposed to everything in the fight.
Yeah, and of course when I got to Sisters, or I'm sorry, Sazine, I had, there's so much to it. So when you're starting to explain it, to be honest, I just kind of lost it. And
That
Yeah.
was kind of
Yeah.
funny.
Joe
You
Bowie
did
picked up
blank
the
out.
ball and he ran with it.
Yeah, and I had watched the video, and I knew what I felt like I needed to know for that fight after watching the video, and so I didn't know all the stuff that needed to people might need to know entirely, but I knew enough that I was like, okay, I know the basics of what people need to know. So there's this and this and this. Pay attention to those things and handle them this way. And yeah, so it seemed like you needed somebody to toss you a life preserver.
So it seemed to me that Fafford was doing a great job leading the raid to that point, but at that point he kind of jumped the shark.
Yeah. So I was going with the football analogy. I fumbled the ball. Joe Bowie picked it up and ran with it. But yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, I kind of stepped right into the jaws of the shark there.
Yeah, but
That
to be
was a
fair,
fun fight, though.
to be fair, I feel like I only really took it to the 10-yard line. I didn't. Because I got to a certain point and I was like, yeah, that's all I know. So the rest of it, I don't know, whatever we do with that.
I think that I know the Fat Boss videos can be tedious to watch sometimes because of all the detail they go into. But I think what's good about it is just go in and see what are the things you need to worry about not standing in, and what's the big mechanic that you need to focus on. But just don't go in totally unprepared,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it's hard to understand what it is you're supposed to do when somebody's explaining it that's seeing it for the first time themselves.
Right. Now, see, that's like with Gorath, all right? I know there's
Yeah.
specific names that you call this stuff. I mean, you can look it up in a dungeon journal and it'll tell you it's this particular spell's name. I like calling it the bowling ball because that's what it looks like. You're bowling them things down. The spikes come up out of the ground and then he throws the ball and it's like bowling. So I even yelled strike and then they were like, no, you got a 7-10 split. But I like explaining it that way because it's more visual rather than using the name. So when you're watching Fat Boss, they use a lot of the names. They say, this is the spell. You got to watch out for this. Well, then you got to try to remember what that spell name is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually try and use a visual descriptor. Don't stand in the swirly on the floor. Or the blue swirly or the whatever. And I know some folks are colorblind, so that may not help them. But I try and use visual descriptors as much as possible, and occasionally I'll try and throw the name in there, especially if it's something that they need to watch for on a timer. So they'll know what to look for. But yeah, it's I totally agree with Lorelai that it's a part of being raid ready is looking up some information and making sure you're prepared for the fight. It's just as important as making sure you've got food and flasks and gemmed and enchanted. It's every bit as important as that.
Yeah, having
Now,
DBM updated.
And I'm not calling out anyone in particular, but there might be another tank. But speaking of tanks, I'm going to call myself out on that one. I think that Darg was ahead of me on the demonic Inquisition fight, and yet between the two of us, we knew what we were supposed to do, but we didn't know exactly how to implement it. So there's a tank swap that goes in, sort of an inner-outer thing that goes on, but we were losing DPS because we weren't mastering the timing of the switch. And it's one of those things that it's sort of hard to know ahead of time how you time it precisely, because short version is we were supposed to come out, taunt the boss, and the other person was supposed to go in and taunt the boss, but we didn't know, is it simultaneous? Does one go first? We eventually figured out what the proper sequencing was, which is the person inside comes out first, and then the inside person goes out only after the boss has been taunted, or we start losing DPS. But we didn't know that, hadn't read that anywhere. It's one of those things, sometimes early stages of a raid, you don't know until you do.
Yeah,
And,
no
if you
substitution
don't
for
wipe a couple
experience.
of times on it, then it might be just too easy a fight to begin with.
Right. And the big thing was, I think, I when I started to explain it, And that's where Fat Boss can be good and bad, because I started explaining it, and I think I put way too much into it because they always explain heroic and normal, and I think I explained a lot of the heroic stuff, and so it was everybody when the tank left. I mean, the first couple of polls, it was like, oh, when the tank leaves, everybody has to leave. Well, that meant everybody had to have. You don't get your extra action button until you've picked up circles. The balls inside there to get your extra action button back to come back out. So if all of a sudden the tank's like, oh, I need to swap out, everybody needs to leave, and that happened a couple of times. A couple of our people were like, I don't have my button, and that's when we found out that must be a heroic mechanic, because on normal, it didn't make any difference. The boss just started hitting on whoever was in there, and it doesn't really hit that hard. It does hit, but not where it's going to kill you. Because I was in there a couple of times by myself.
Yeah, I had to. I mean, just a mage with my shield, and that was pretty much it. And I tanked the mini boss in there for a good 10 or 15 seconds, and I started to get beaten down after that. It was starting to hurt, and I just called out. I said, I need a healer inside, and then a healer came in and started throwing me some heals, and I was fine. But I was able to survive it for a good amount of time.
Yeah, because I know in Fat Boss they were saying, now once you get inside, those little swirlies on the ground, stay out of those, so you're running around, and then trying to hit the guy to get the little balls to come off him, because as you do damage to the little mini boss that's in there, it throws the balls on the ground, and that takes your bar away. It starts cutting it down so you can get your extra action button down. I spent a lot of time the first few times just staying out of those little tiny swirlies on the ground, and then realized they're really not doing a lot of damage if I do step hit them. So I was concentrating more on just getting the ball and getting my meter back so I could go back out and finish damaging the boss.
Yeah, I pretty much I took on a practice in that, where when my bar would start to get too high and I knew I was going to start taking heavy damage from that build up on that bar, I would go inside, locate the boss in the room, and literally start running in a circle around the boss while hitting it with ice lances, because I can cast those on the run. And even if they're not empowered or anything like that, whatever, who cares? They're damaging the boss. They're making him kick out little balls that are going to drop my bar down. Collect up enough and get back out inside of like 10 seconds. I would hit it as much as I could and run it around a circle around the boss, and then immediately leave and go back out to DPSing on the main boss again.
Yeah, and this is part of learning the dance steps, right? What's core, what's most important, what's peripheral, what's dangerous, what's not so dangerous, and then we just get more efficient as we go. It does make me think we're not going to be spending a lot of time on normal in this dungeon.
No,
well, maybe.
Well, I think what it is too is we're coming in heroic geared, for the most part, and so it's making getting through normal a little easier.
True, because we've never gotten through heroic on any other expansion to where we got an AOTC starting the next one. We gotten close. We were a couple of bosses away, and then we went to the new raid. But this is the first time, so yeah.
I think it's giving us a really strong head start in terms of gear level. So I think it'll pay off in the long run.
Oh, definitely. So I'm curious. So I know JoBui and I both ranged. So Lorelei, when you had to go inside the little demonic, the little cage, was there any real different mechanic for you versus us? Because I agree with JoBui. I ran around the outside of the cage and shot him and just collected him and then left.
No, I could get up close to him. The swirlies didn't really hurt me that much. And I just did a lot of whirlwind just to get those little balls to pop. And I'd grab a couple if I needed, whatever I needed until my bar came back up again. And then I got right out. I didn't stay around to get a lot of extra orbs show up, because you're not damaging the boss by staying in there for a long time.
Yeah, now I did notice, right. You're not actually, I don't think you're damaging the boss at all.
You're not hurting the boss at all.
Yeah,
so
no.
Staying in there to help somebody coming in later, I just think that's kind of a waste of DPS.
I just, and Fafford, unlike you, when I was talking about running around the boss, I'm talking about like Lorelei was. I was literally inches from the boss. I could reach out and tap him on the shoulder, just hitting him, just close range. So because that's where the balls pop out at, it seemed, and then getting out as soon as I could. I was in that range for that.
Well, it's a really small room to begin with, but I was actually literally running around the outside edge of the room and just spamming Cobra Shot, and until I lost all my bar, and then I'd see 3 or 4 of them, I'd just run and go grab 4 of them. Now, I did notice, though, that once your bar is gone and you got your extra action button, you can still run over those balls and just make them disappear, so you got to be careful of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was trying. I wasn't sticking around to hit the boss a few times, but like I just kept hitting my button while I was, heading to hit my action button to get out of there. Just because I know that the healers are going in there too, and they need to pick up some balls. So just in case they were in there and they needed a couple extra, I would throw a couple attacks on my way out, but not sticking around for any length of time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then, with the tank constantly being in there, with one tank being in there all the time, that helps because he's constantly hitting it and they're always popping out here and there.
Right.
Well, maybe the tank shouldn't be in there for as long as what I'm thinking as we're talking about this.
Well, you tell us. Because I know you guys struggled a little bit on the first couple of polls. One of the mechanics that I noticed that I was having problems with is when you weren't supposed to shoot because there's 2 bosses outside that share health pool. One goes into a don't shoot me phase, and then you're supposed to shoot the other one. And I didn't realize that until somebody mentioned it, that when the flame wall goes up, don't shoot. And we called them Alpha and Bravo, A and B. Don't shoot B, because I stayed on B the entire time because that's the one that needs to be interrupted. And
Yeah.
we did fantastic on the interruptions.
My thought on the tank perspective then is that from the inside, the only reason we need to be there is to protect the range of melee going in and the healers. But if they're not taking significant enough damage, it would be way easier if we spend only 3/4 of our time in there rather than the whole time. Because I could be out in 15 seconds or less, depending on if I was able to clear the accumulated whatever it is effect that I'm taking from the outside. I could be out again almost right away, and it'd be much easier to handle the tank swapping. We don't want to lose DPS or healers to that, but if it's not that big a deal, tank on the outside is going to be way more useful.
We did very well, actually. And what you were talking about there about having to switch between the 2 bosses, like, I just thought initially, because I hadn't been in that fight before, that, when it started going meh, meh, meh at me when I was attacking Bravo, then that I just had to stop DPSing. So I was like standing there for a moment. And then after I learned that, I can attack the other boss while he's, doing damage to me if I attack him. Then I figured out a pattern for, okay, so he's about to do that, so I'm going to switch to the other boss and start attacking him until that boss is now clear to attack, and then I'll switch back to that one. And so I was able to keep consistent DPS going the whole time.
Right. And with the first couple of polls, I'd hear that go off, and I thought I was standing in something, so I'm running around going, what am I standing in? I don't see anything on the floor, and then found out that, that was why. I was still attacking the boss.
Yeah, some of that stuff can be a little confusing at first to learn, but once you get it down, it gets so much easier.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
the fun part.
I think this next week we're just gonna fly. I think we'll get through Harjatan and start on Sazine just on Friday. I really do.
One of the other things that I like about how they seem to have it set up is that there seems to be a number of tier pieces that are very accessible right at the beginning of the raid. I think we got down 3 tier bosses during our weekend raid on our first weekend out. And I think that's going to be great for getting people some of the tier 20 tier pieces so that we can start getting those bonuses as well, which I think will help us going down the road for the rest of the bosses.
Yeah. So I actually read an article about that, about having a 4-piece and a 2-piece from a different set.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know that Dorn is going to try and do that to some extent. Um, I personally, I just really want to get that 4-piece set up going from the tier 20 because they kind of nerfed Mage's 2-piece set. So it's an okay bonus, but it's really not worth it if I have better gear coming out of the new raid.
All right, so let's move off Demonic Inquisition. We're not even going to talk about Goroth and Harjatan because those were basically single pole takedowns. But Mistress Azine, this was a fun fight in my opinion. I mean, we only pulled I think 3 times on it. It really wasn't too bad, but it was a lot of fun. So let's talk about some of the mechanics on that. My favorite, I have to say, was the big shark coming through the middle of the fight.
Cool.
That was my favorite.
Mhm.
Was it a shark? I just saw. I mean, I saw a
it's a great
fishy
big
shape.
shark.
Yeah.
I'll have to look more closely next time.
Oh, he
just-
comes through just really
flashes
fast.
his tail at you.
Yep. The whale was pretty cool. You know, I mean, big whale comes and sucks you in, but so then you're like Jonah from the whale. That's what I was thinking that one is from.
And I didn't even. I also didn't really see the whale because I was looking for the mechanic on the ground at the time. So I didn't really visually look at the whale itself. Is it sitting outside the glass there or something?
To be honest, I didn't either because I was more concentrating on getting some ink, so I could
Right.
get because you got to have 3 or 4 inks
3.
over to the
yeah.
whale. Yeah, before it'll disappear, and we did that mechanic very well.
Mhm.
You know,
There was one time where we didn't have any ink to throw down there on the floor, and I wasn't sure where it was. And then somebody who had accidentally picked up ink got sucked in and sucked over to that spot, and then it cleared it off, and the whale went away. And I was like, oh, okay, now that's done.
I think it's
Yeah.
easier for range to see all that because I only noticed it once during my raid, and it was like I couldn't see anything jumping until I moved my camera angle because when you're up close to the boss, you don't get to see that stuff.
New raids
I
are always
suppose.
overwhelming, though, right? There's just so much going on, and you're trying to just figure out the main, who the boss is, what they're
Yeah.
doing, and how to respond, and ugly stuff on floor move is about as much as you get, and then after that, you get a little more familiar.
You start getting used to it, and then you have a little more time to, appreciate the ambiance.
Yeah, smell the virtual flowers.
I know there was the one time that you got to kill the ads in order to put down the moss, the green moss, and then that protects you from the whirlwind wall that comes across. And I think it was our first pull. We're getting close to the end of the boss. We're like, yeah, we're getting there. And all of a sudden it was like one wall of whirlpools, then another one from another direction, then another one from another direction, and another one. We're like, well, what the hell's going on? And it turned out that was the enrage timer.
Yeah, and on top of that, the green piles were not stopping it.
Yeah, no, they were going right through it. So, but that was, and there was a couple of times there where we didn't have any of the extra ads killed, and the wall was coming, and then all of a sudden one went down, and there was a little tiny pool, and everybody stacked up behind it. I thought it was so cool. I mean, it was just instinctual. I was like, oh, there's one dead. Get on the other side.
Yeah, we learned that mechanic pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, that comes from I really think that came from the dance step with the
Elisand,
yeah.
the rings.
The rings, because, you had to get the blue
Oh,
and
yeah.
the red one down. And I think that's because we just had that mechanic to where you had to wait till it hit and then you could move around. Well, it actually took the whirlpools out when it hit it. So it wasn't like we had to wait for it and then it slowed down and came through. It just took them out, except for that enrage.
It is nice when you can transfer a skill too. You've done something somewhere else and it's just in a new form and you do it. And I think that's why for some of these we handle them really quite well. I think that's why Sisters of the Moon is throwing us for a loop. Something's going on there and we haven't figured out what that trick is yet.
Yeah. So any more comments on Sazine, and we'll move on to Sisters.
Well, one thing I liked about Sazine, wait, no, I think that's Sisters. No, it's Sisters that I'm thinking of, actually.
Okay.
Totally.
All right. Well, yeah. So I just thought Tazine was pretty cool because you're underwater sort of, so you're like on top of a glass floor and there's fish underneath you. But then it reminds me of Outland.
Vishar, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that one was pretty cool. I liked that one. Didn't necessarily like all the water mechanics behind it.
Throne of the Tides, right?
Yes.
Yep, Throne of Tides.
Yes. But this one was pretty cool because it was just a kind of a little,
It
here's
was
a little
different.
underwater stuff.
It
Yeah,
was
right?
interesting. Yep, that's my first favorite one. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, and what I've noticed with all of these so far, they have a common theme that they're all fluid. There's nothing set. Yeah, so you can't put down a marker and say, this is where this is going to happen, this is where this is going to happen, this is where this is going to happen. It's just, it's going to, like when the shark comes in, he comes in a different direction. So you can't always be standing on this, one side and miss it. Because
Right.
I was doing that. I was like, okay, here's the entrance. I'm going to stand over here because the first time it came through, this was totally clear. And the next time the shark came through, I was standing right in the middle of it.
Yeah, you gotta be. I like the on your toes dynamic mechanics that are happening with that, and they are fun fights. I liked all of them, and they looked cool. And the mechanics were interesting.
Well, as much as I could see them, because that's what I was saying, because they're all so fluid, I didn't have time to look around and admire the view. And during the fight, I can, where normally as a hunter, I can just sit there and spam my buttons and move my mouse around and kind of look and see all the beautiful artwork and everything. This one, no.
Well,
Yeah.
the other thing is and this was something that they've been working towards in their raids that I think is a really good move. Is it seems like all of the main mechanics, for the most part, are visual. I mean, you can see them. Where sometimes in the past with previous raids, I mean, you might get a debuff on you, and the only place it showed up was on your debuff bar. It didn't show you that you had something on it. It didn't make you glow a certain color or put a ring on the ground or whatever. You just had to know you had it on you. And it seems like with these raids, if you have something on you, there's a visual indicator telling you have it on you.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah, because otherwise, like when the green arrow would come out, if you didn't put a marker above my head, I probably wouldn't have seen that I had it. All right, Sisters of the Moon. Sisters of the Moon, where we went wrong.
We were totally eclipsed at that point.
Yes.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah,
So-
that's got a weird mechanic to it that you have to really learn. I still don't quite understand that one myself.
Well, that's what I'm admitting to. I don't understand.
I'll admit
because
to it. I'm like, oh, the floor was white the whole time. What am I doing?
I looked at our stats on the fight from our logs, and I'm gonna say 85% or maybe even 90% of the deaths that happened because it was either the shadow damage or the moon damage, and it was a big explosion of something that just wiped us. There was a few of the arrows. So there's this arrow that comes out. There's two kinds of arrows. There's one arrow that comes out that you want to get people to stand in, and then the other one you don't. And it was the one that you're supposed to get people to stand in. That one wiped me out once, and I know it got probably 6 people that it knocked out that way. But the majority of everything else was, God, I wish I could remember the name of it. It was lunar or the shadow damage version of the same thing. And it just boom, wipes us. And that's where we're at. Every wipe that we had, and there was 5 or 6 before we ran out of time, was on that same mechanic. We got to figure that out before next weekend.
Yeah, the floor changing like that, the going from night side to light side, it reminds me exactly of if you've ever played a druid and you are transporting yourself to the Dream Grove, and it puts like this moon shape, a moon above your head, and it slowly turns, from day side to night side, or maybe it's night side to day side, and then you transport away. It's the same thing, but it just is happening on the floor, And I found
And
what I
different
was
in that it kills you.
yeah, and different than it kills you. But the thing I found out myself doing was I was trying to make sure that like I kind of moved from one side of the room to the other, like making sure that I stayed in the dark side as the light side was encroaching across the room, as long as I could without kind of going over and having it become horrible, and then stepping over to the other side. So and then kind of getting ready to all the way back to the other side of the room so I could kind of wait for the dark side to come back in and get into that for a moment, and then go back to the other side of the room and wait for the dark side to catch up. So I found myself like going from one side of the room to the other side of the room, trying to make sure that I could keep dropping the stacks or whatever it is that is building up on me from standing in the different colors or the different light or dark sides.
Which seems like a lot of work until we figure out what it is that's killing us or how it is. I think it's that we have a stacking debuff, and the boss triggers a mechanic that if we have that debuff on it, it's going to wipe us out. And so we've got to be able to know that's coming and know what our plan is going to be. But I haven't got my head around that one yet either. Otherwise, if we're all running around trying to keep the debuffs low, that's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution is for that one. That's just yet. I don't think I haven't watched the video for that one entirely. I started watching it, but I didn't finish watching it because, like Fafford, I didn't really think we would be getting there.
Me either. I do like though that Blizzard's got a surprise up their sleeve, right? It's not like a variant on old mechanic. There's something here that's new that we have to figure out. I like these puzzles.
Yeah, well, and I did watch the video, but I watched Sazine first and went, oh, well, and I even told Mommy Fortuna, I was like, oh, this is where we're going to be. I'm not even going to watch the next one. She goes, well, we better just in case. We've surprised ourselves. And I went, yeah, you're right. Okay. So I watched Sisters of the Moon, but it's longer video than Sazine. And I think like halfway through it, I kind of tuned it out.
Yeah.
And I might have missed that mechanic part. So I'm going to really concentrate this week and watch it a couple of times.
We need a brilliant, succinct explanation for that dynamic. A 3-sentence summary that we can all go, oh, to.
Yeah, right?
So if anyone out there knows it, comment on our podcast, email us, tell us, because we could use that.
Yeah.
I don't mind learning. I do mind dying over and over and over again just because we can't figure something out.
Speaking of getting fan comments and stuff, we got one from a guy last week. His name's Zero Cool. He said he really enjoys our show. Grats on the AOTC. Of course, this was from last week's episode. And keep up the great work.
Nice.
Yeah.
I believe isn't Zero Cool a reference to the 1980s movie with Sandra Bullock called Hackers?
Okay. It could be, but what's really cool about this guy, catch the pun there, really cool, about Zero Cool. Okay. His avatar.
Yeah, we zeroed in on it.
So you guys know that I'm a huge martial arts fan. I used to watch all those Sunday Chinese martial arts films that, you can't understand them and it's all subtitled, but they do they zoom in on the eyes and then they zoom in on the other guy's eyes and then they battle. Those really old ones that are they're fantastic. They're all the, you got sound effects, all that. So his avatar is the actor Jim Kelly, who did Williams on Enter the Dragon. That was the Bruce Lee, his really famous movie that Bruce Lee did. Williams was the black guy that got in trouble and he beat up the two cops, so he escaped to this karate tournament to get away from the law. But he also played in 2 movies where he was lead actor, Black Belt Jones 1 and 2.
I've seen that.
Yeah, right? So, and then he was also the Black Samurai. So his avatar, Zero Cool's avatar, is Jim Kelly, and he's got that look from Enter the Dragon. It was so cool. I had to bring all that up for him because I was like, your avatar is awesome. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about 7.25. So anybody learned anything else from the last week on 725 that's changed, that's really changed the way they play? I know for a hunter I have some, but we'll start off. Jobui, did you have anything that you noticed?
Um, well, I mean, there was the crafted gear upgrade, which of course,
Unsubtle power, yeah.
yeah, and just the crafted gear in general. I really like what they did with that. They made it useful. It allowed me to do a lot of stat balancing on my character. I really liked that. And I think I might have mentioned that last week. But the other thing that I'm liking about 725, I don't really know that there's a lot of difference besides just the new raid coming out. Because I mean, basically, I got nerfed a little bit, um, and so I've had to change up some play style. Um, but I kind of wish, I really wish that they would have gone, done a little bit better with like class balancing, but like not taking the class. Like I want to see them make all the classes like in a spec, or all the specs in a class be equally viable. So and I just am not seeing them do that with any class really. Um, but so that was a little bit of a disappointment with me because I heard they were doing, 725 was going to be a little bit more class balancing and whatnot. And I was thinking, okay, that would be awesome. What if it was just, your preference as to whether you played Arcane, Frost, or Fire? And, like they were all within, a certain margin where they were equally viable in raid situations. But again, it's not that way. So I guess I was a little disappointed in that aspect of it.
Now, when you were saying, though, the improvement of crafted gear, I thought you were talking about the improvement to artifact, or rather, legendary items. And I
Oh,
was
right.
kicking myself that I hadn't caught on Tuesday to jump right on to doing the Unsettled Power quest to get your legendaries from, was it 940 to 970? And
Yeah.
somehow, maybe we talked about that last week. Maybe you mentioned it, Joe Bowie, and it just didn't stick in my head. And so I was a couple days behind, and I've just upgraded it after our raid rather than before. Would have been helpful to have slightly better gear going in, but if any of our listeners haven't caught on to that, you definitely want to pick up that quest. I think it's the blacksmith in Dalaran. And you grab that quest, and then you start to collect up the writhing essences. A couple ways to do it. You can get it in the daily dungeon now, I've noticed. You can get it by doing a Mythic Plus and getting some, I think it's 20 that comes in your...
The class hall chest is 20.
Yeah, and then I think, do we pick some up in our raid as when we took bosses down? I didn't notice if we did.
Yeah,
I've got
them in bosses and World Quest chests.
Yeah, bosses have a chance to drop one or two, but they don't necessarily drop them every time. I know the dungeon, like the daily heroic dungeon, is 5. Emissary quests are, I guess, from what I've heard, 4 to 6. I've heard 7, but I've never seen 7.
Yeah, I've averaged 5. That's sort of been the bread and butter for me getting my badges.
Yeah, and I think there was something else that I can't remember where it came from. There was I think I heard that you can get them from the Legion, turning in your Legion things, but I haven't gotten any from that, so I'm not certain about that.
All right. Lorelei, 7.2.5 changes?
They didn't really do anything much to Fury Warriors. Arms Warriors got a lot of change, but I haven't gotten that spec worked on yet. They just increased our haste by 5% for Furious Slash and our talent. It can stack up to 3 times. And then one of our artifact traits called Juggernaut increases the damage dealt by our Execute by 5%, and we can stack that up to 99 times.
Oh.
So that's nice.
Yeah.
And that's really all they did with Warriors. They changed out one of the legendaries. Our ring, which was like one of our best things, is now worthless. And you need to continue with the helmet and either the cloak, which I cannot get to save my life, or the legs, which I do have. So I'm going to use those pretty much until I can maybe get the cloak. Hopefully I'll get the cloak at some point.
Yeah, I know. Dorton's got the shoulders for hunters, and I know he was upset about that because they changed the way that part of the legendary works. But with hunters, the dire frenzy, if you take the talent dire frenzy, which replaces your dire beast, but now there's 2 charges of it. So I got to get with JobUI at some point here and figure out the weak aura, because I get 1 and I got, when my icon goes away, the icon for it coming back comes up, but there's still 1 there because there's 2 charges. So I got to figure out something to change that so I know that there's 2 charges there instead of just 1. But
Yeah,
he
I can
seems
help
to
you
be
with
the
that.
weak auras. Yeah, I kind of figured you're the weak auras master.
I'm getting pretty good with it. I've actually been in touch with the creator of Weak Auras a few times now, talking to him about how to get things to do exactly what I want them to do, and all that. He's a pretty responsive guy. So if you're out there and you're a Weak Auras fan and you have a question or a suggestion, I would highly recommend getting in touch with V'ger, who's the guy who makes it. He's on Facebook too.
Or we can get him on the podcast.
Yeah, maybe. I think he's from Germany.
Oh, well, that would be interesting too.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's definitely something doable. With some of the changes now, Lorelei, wasn't it the Draught of Souls or something that they changed for you guys?
Yeah, I believe they did. That's been a trinket that I never liked anyway because it's an on-use trinket,
Hmm.
and when you're in a fight and you've really got to learn when that's good to use and when you just need to leave it alone. So I really don't like it. I use it when I can, and sometimes I get caught being stuck up in the air and not being able to move at the wrong time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. I'm looking forward to getting some new trinkets.
I'm right there with you on the on-use trinkets. I am not a fan of on-use trinkets. I know some people just love them, because they're like, oh, you could use them exactly the right time and stuff. But I just like the put it on and forget about it trinkets.
Yep. Got too much to do without having to worry about another
On-use are
button.
great for tanks, right? The emergency buttons are great for tanks, but others not so much.
I always forget about mine. To be totally honest, and if it wasn't for Jordan, he pointed out that I had the it's a fireball that you shoot out and it goes out and it damages 4 or 5 guys in one area. It's like an AOE. I didn't even know I had it on my heirloom, or not my heirloom, my legendary. And I was like, oh, hey, yeah, that is a use. I better put a button for that.
Yeah.
And I still at times forget to use it because I'm doing everything else, and I look down and I was like, oh, hey, that's still highlighted. Oh, I should click that.
Yeah, and they are so easy to forget, and some of them are just weird. Now this was for one of my alts, but my monk alt got a trinket that you're supposed to use it, and you will garrot the creature. You'll like apparently hit it and choke it or something for a certain amount of damage. And I tried using it today, and I actually have to run behind whatever it is that I'm attacking in order to use that trinket. It wouldn't work when I was standing in front of them. So I'm like, why did they give this to a monk? It seems like that would be like a rogue thing or something, but whatever. Goofy on-use trinket for my alt that I'll happily get rid of as soon as possible.
All right. Let's move on a little bit. So I do have some really cool information. I was listening to the Goblin Goldcast last week, and Mac has joined us from the Goblin Goldcast for the last couple weeks because he got his tune to 110, and he's been raiding with us. And every once in a while, his wife comes on, Mrs. Mac, and she ran a couple of raids with us and some mythics. But Dex was saying in his podcast that, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but let me just play it here really quick. Because this is as far as I got in listening to their podcast. I didn't get any further than this, but this is what he said.
So anyway, so let me just put that out there. I don't think it'll cost that much for me to faction change all of them over to Horde, and then I can just play my honor. No. Anyway, before certain people that from the Lion's Pride Tavern that might listen to our podcast before they panic.
So, as you can see, he's willing to pay for everybody's character transfer for us to come over to Horde and do a raid with him. Instead of instead of him getting a tune-up, just one tune-up, he's willing to pay for all 29 of our tunes to come over. I think that's awesome. I think we should take him up on it.
Ugh,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
He was joking. Although he said he did have the money. I listened to the rest of it. He did say he had the money to do it, but he said he was joking.
Yeah, I know. I heard it too. I just wanted to throw this in the podcast to give him a heart attack.
Yeah, here we go. I've been there, done that.
Yep. So,
Hey, one other thing I want to throw in there about 725 that I really liked was the increase of heirloom gear from 100 to 110. For leveling alts, assuming you've got the gold to increase those, boy, does that make a huge difference. I mean, you can get 45, 50, 55% XP increase for your alts to level them up. I've done since the heirlooms came out, I've done 3 more of my alts, and I'm working on the last 2 of my full set.
Yeah, Jobo, you gave me that advice just a couple days ago. I bought the heirlooms, and I went on 3 of the Legion. What do they call them? Invasions. Yeah, I did 3 invasions and went up 4 levels.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. The Legion, those coupled with the Legion invasions, when you do. As a lower level character, you can still do the world quests that pop up for the Legion invasions, and since we can fly, we can easily get there. They scale to your level still, so they're not super difficult. They're a little tough because you're got a lobby tune, but it's you get, I think, I was getting like 91,000 XP per world quest from those. And
were you using the group finder for those?
No, well, I don't use group finder specifically. I just use the in-game one, where some of them I'll go and like, especially if it's one of the world bossy type of ones, those ones I usually just open up the group finder that Blizzard has there on the side and pick a group and join it, and then which basically what the group finders do automatically for you, for the most part. But a lot of the ones that are just like grab stuff off the ground or smash this crystal and kill 4 or 5 things or whatever it is, those ones I just attack things, and a lot of other people will jump in on my fights with me, so that they don't end up being that difficult.
That being said, the speed at which that group quest finder works is I'll be zoning in. I'll push the button ahead of time because I'm getting good at preemptively doing that. And before I land, before I find my first mob, the quest's half done.
Oh, wow.
I love that.
Yeah, it's unbelievably fast. It's uncannily fast.
I do have to say, I was doing one. I was doing my druid, and I was just in bird form, and I was just flying above him. And this guy whispers me, and he goes, "Hey, druid, why don't you come down and help?" And I was like, "No, because you almost finished it for me."
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, there are times. Guys. There are times when some of those mechanics, as a low level character who tends to get beat up pretty badly by a large group of mobs, I would just like fly up and hover just above the ground by the crystals and tag the crystal until it popped, and then fly away real quickly before the mobs would kill me.
Yep. Done that. Collect the crates. Fly over to the crates, the mobs attacking you, and just fly off.
See, I figured I wasn't going to be leveling any of my alts this expansion, but they've made it way more appealing. So it's really fast to do. Like, just it's faster than doing other kind of questing, or even just doing some world quests.
I've only got 2 left of my 12. That's because I have 1 of every class in the game. So I've got 10 of them completed. I have 2 left, my priest and my rogue, and those are both on in progress. But I especially now with the heirlooms, I'm certainly going to finish them off and have all 12 of my classes finished pretty soon, I think.
Very cool. Yeah, Pistol was running with me on a couple. He invited me to heal a couple of his heroic dungeons for him, and I was at 109. I just needed a little bit more experience to go to 110. So as soon as I did, I took my book of artifact knowledge and I read it and found 450,000 artifact power, and went back and we were like, all right, let's see how many times I can go up in level. I went up like 9 times. Unfortunately, and JoBui pointed this out, because I was whispering him during the week going, why am I not getting it right? And he goes, well, what level is your artifact knowledge? And I went, oh, it's only 25. How do you get to 40? I had bought the artifact knowledge book
Oh, the cheap one.
when I wasn't at 40 yet on my main tune.
Oh, so you
it
sent
gave
the
it to
old
me-
ones.
Yes.
Oh,
And so I didn't have it all. So then I went and bought another one for 40 and gave it to him. And oh my gosh, I went up so fast.
yeah. And just as another tip, when you're getting those alts like up, once you hit 110 and you send your alt a knowledge of 40, Suramar questline opens at that point. And I know some people like Fafford are not big fans of the Suramar questline, but I actually happen to like that questline. But that questline, it gives you so many artifact knowledge tokens that before you even finish the questline, you can get Concordance 1. Just from doing the Suramar questline with your freshly minted alt. So, and that's Concordance of the Legion Fall. That's the first of the Paragon ranks on your artifact weapon. Rank 52, I think, is what it comes up as. But you can get all the way to 52 just from doing the Suramar questline.
Well, I'm going to tell you. So I finally got my 40, and then I went out and did 2 days, just 2 days, worth of world quests. And the artifact knowledge, the artifact power I collected just on 2 days of doing that, I got my first concordance.
Oh,
So
wow.
it doesn't take long at all.
So you don't have to do Suramar, is what you're saying.
Right.
You don't
Those of
have
you who
to,
are like me.
but it is a good way to get it, especially if you
Absolutely.
like the questline.
All right, guys, let's cue the music. It's time for Lorelei's Pet Battle Minute.
Hello. Now that patch 7.2.5 is out, we have been given a secret pet, and that's the Sundarter hatchling. This pet is tradable, so if you want to make some gold, you're going to be doing a lot of farming, but those things are going for thousands and thousands of gold on the auction house. You'll find this fairy dragon off the northern coast of Winter Spring in a place called the Cave of Consumption. You're going to need multiple consumables to make it to the end of the cave. And you need a ton of items. You can find those on Wowhead. I won't sit here and give you a whole list. Many of them can be made by alchemists, so get your buddy to help you make things or make an alchemist up and get started on that. There are a couple of drops and dungeon runs you can do. Scotty's Lucky Coin out in Townlong Steps is a drop from a elite sprite. But I suggest you do that either early in the morning or later in the evening because the lines to kill him get very, very long. And you're inside a cave, so there's not a lot of standing room space. The other one is the Gordok Ogre Suit, which can be obtained from a repeatable quest in Dire Mall. That's a good item you can put on the auction house, and I went ahead and bought it because it wasn't that expensive. I guess there'd been a lot of them out at the time. So if you're looking for a complete list of items that you'll need, go to Wowhead and a guide on how to get your hatchling and have fun.
All right. And then there is...
Getting Thieves with JoBui.
There are 3 basic types of attacks, and choosing which type you will focus on can mean the difference between good DPS and great DPS. Those 3 types are single target, cleave, and AoE. Single target DPS means that you're focusing all of your attacks on a single target, usually the boss. When you want to optimize your DPS for single target damage, use spells and abilities that concentrate on one target only. Generally, your single target attacks are going to do the most damage when you only have to attack one target. Cleave damage means to use attacks that primarily focus on a single target, but some damage is transferred or applied to other targets near your primary target. This is most appropriate for fights where there are about 2 or 3 targets in total. An example might be a boss with an ad or 2 that need to go down, but where it isn't important that the ads die very quickly. AoE, or Area of Effect damage, is a spell or ability that hits all targets within a certain range. These attacks are not generally very strong against a single target, but when you have 3 or more targets available, the DPS can really start to stack up. The more targets that will be hit by your AoE attacks, the faster your DPS will climb. Using AoE attacks when there are large groups of ads is a great idea, as it will help burn all of them down quickly. When you're selecting talents and what artifact relics you use, keep in mind what kind of role you want to play in your raid. If you're not sure what role you should be focusing on, a good rule of thumb is that you make sure you have decently strong single target talents with 1 or 2 cleave or AoE talents selected as well. If you want to optimize your DPS per fight, you can keep Tomes of the Tranquil Mind in your bag, allowing you to quickly switch up talents between bosses. Knowing when to use single target, cleave, or AoE attacks, and which fights those attacks are appropriate for, will help you keep getting those deeps.
And then there's epistles.
What's wrong with tanking? What's wrong with tanking? What's wrong with tanking in a dress? What's wrong with tanking? What's wrong with tanking? What's wrong with tanking in a dress?
This week's A Tanking Minute, I'd like to talk a little bit about shifting priorities and adjusting your gear. I'll tell you a little secret. Over the past few months, Nighthold's been getting easier for us, and I've been subtly tweaking, good thing Tap isn't here, I've been subtly tweaking my gear toward DPS and away from survivability. In other words, I've been taking secondary stats like haste, versatility, mastery, critical strike, and I've been shifting them ever so slightly so that I'm producing more damage and doing less to actually protect myself. So I'm just a slight bit squishier than I have been, but our healers are getting more and more strong. That hasn't really been a big deal. So I've changed what's called my stat priority. So if you look up on something like Icy Veins, you can see the stat priorities for your tanking toon will have a number of secondary characteristics which are recommended. You might know these already. Pally, for example, is haste, versatility, mastery, critical strike, in that order. DPS, on the other hand, still has haste, but then it's critical strike, mastery, versatility. So the idea here is that maybe your gems, your enchants, maybe even if you have 2 pieces that are comparable, you can shift over from one to the other. And yet, in shifting your stat priority, it means a slight tweak to make you squishier in exchange for a little more outgoing damage. And that's actually helped us finish our raids faster, work a little better. Not that it's a huge amount for a tank in terms of overall damage, but it can make a difference. Of course, this week, it was Tomb of Sargeras, and so we needed to do something a little different. So I shifted this week my stat priority. And I instead try to make myself as invulnerable as possible. DPS going right out the window. So in that case, I switched over using, as I say, haste, versatility, mastery, crit for me, using that from Icy Veins as a source, to make sure that I was just not even a little bit squishy. Now, as we get used to the fight and things improve, that may change, and I might shift again. But now's the time to be looking at your gear, even if you have alternate legendaries you could use. You could switch up to make yourself just that little bit less squishy as you go into new content and try something a little tougher. That means you need to be a little bit tougher. So time to shift your priorities and adjust your gear.
Awesome. It's WFN News, Warcraft Fafford News. The race is on, but it looks like the command center is the next building up for the Broken Shores. It'll have Forces of the Order and Worthy Champions. The weekly quest is a PvP brawl. Woohoo, PvP. WoW tokens are coming down. They're 121k in the States now. Tomb of Sargeras, Mythic, and the first section of LFR, The Gates of Hell, come out Tuesday with the patch. And Midsummer Fire Festival is still going on until, I believe, the 5th of July. So get out there and get some of that Fire Festival going. 'cause it's summer.
Yep. I'm still flying.
Are you still working on yours?
I'm still working on it. Yep.
All right, guys. We have come to an end. Another great podcast, guys. Thanks a lot for coming. Everybody out there, thanks for listening. All of our beautiful music for our minutes were supplied by Charm. Please go visit her website, her YouTube channel. The links are in the description. If you got any questions for JoBui, for Deeps, or Tapachino for healing, the links are there for their emails. You can email them directly. You can also go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Lions Pride Tavern. Please come join us. Questions, comments, shoot some pictures out there. Let us know what you think about the Sisters of the Moon and what we're doing wrong with dying by that explosion. Give us a hand. Help us out here.
And as always, a huge thanks to our fans.
Absolutely. We love our fans. So, and Zero Cool. Love your avatar, man. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Have a great week.
See you, folks.
Before certain people that from the Lions Pride Tavern that might listen to our podcast before they panic, that's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke.
I kissed an orc and I liked it. The taste of his Bulgur chapstick. I kissed an orc just to try it. I hope my ally friends don't mind it. It felt so wrong, it felt so right. Don't mean I'm in love tonight.
If you like this podcast, throw us a like and subscribe to our channel. And please, leave comments or questions below. Maybe we'll answer them on the air next podcast. We are hosted on Podomatic.com. Our website is lionspridetavern.podomatic.com. Our podcast also airs on iTunes for Apple users, Google Play for Androids, and YouTube. Just search World of Warcraft Lions Pride Tavern Podcast. See you next week, and thanks for listening.